This is where to use your hand traps against the most popular meta decks for the July 2026 Master Duel meta. Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you. I want to start making more of these hand trap guides in order to give people a better idea of how to play against the current meta. Of course, I'm usually pretty good at updating how to play with current meta decks, so I thought it only fitting if I show you how to counter them as well. Pretty huge disclaimer I do have to give right up top is that a lot of the time when you should be using a specific hand trap really is super situationally dependent on your opponent's board state, on what's in your hand. All those kinds of factors are really important. However, this video aims to provide a good jumping off point to show you the most prominent choke points of, again, some of the more popular and or powerful decks of the current Master Duel meta. Before we get into that though, real quick, I'll give a huge shout out right up top to our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers. For those who joined here on YouTube, you not only get access to every YouTube video when it's uploaded, which is usually at least a couple of days, if not up to a week before it goes live for everyone else, but you also get some members exclusive content. If you're looking for even more exclusive content, you know what, head over to patreon.com/hexlex. I upload there at least 3 times a week, and it's all content that is exclusive to the Patreon. None of it is uploaded to YouTube. We often review new cards as they're being revealed. We take a look at metagame breakdowns for not only Master Duel, but OCG and TCG. We look at replays I don't have time to get to here on the channel, duel lives, all that kind of fun stuff. So either way you choose to support, you will get your name featured at the end credits of every video. Again, huge thank you to those supporters. But let's go ahead and get right on into where to hand trap against the current Master Duel meta. Okay, we're going to start by talking about Kewl Tune, probably one of the most popular and powerful decks around right now. Obviously got a huge boost with the recent addition of Vydralis Harmonia. So if you're holding like one Veiler, one Ash Blossom, an Imperm, or even a Ghost Bell and like no other hand traps, I think one of your best opportunities to utilize it against Kewl Tune is right at the beginning of their combo line when they normal summon something like Q or Rekko. That's actually going to be a pretty common through line you'll see against a lot of these meta decks, is that, again, if you're holding like one negate in your hand, using it on their first play and kind of hoping they don't have an extender is often your best bet. In particular, you can also, however, utilize Ash Blossom against Kewl Tune Synchro. If they open that, sometimes they'll fire it off during the draw phase to try to play around Joel and Lockbird. And if they do that, I actually like using the Ash Blossom there, even if it is my only hand trap, because if you're able to avoid the Kewl Tune player getting any bodies on board, that is ideal. Because even if you Veiler or Imperm Q or Rekko, then you'll still have to contend with the fact that they can still synchro summon with another monster from their hand. Now, this play, hand trapping Q or Rekko normal summon, has actually gotten stronger in recent months because of the limit of Kewl Tune Rotary. It makes it a lot less likely that they'll have that follow-up extender in hand, making that hand trap utilized against their first play a lot more impactful a lot of the time. Another good really opportunity to use Ghost Bell against this deck is actually against Kewl Tune Remix. So if you do open Ghost Bell alongside Veiler or Imperm, I would definitely consider holding the Ghost Bell for later to utilize against Remix if they are able to still make it for your follow-up turn. By using Ghost Bell against the Remix, you stop them from performing a Synchro Summon, typically for RS or Zaylin on your turn, which will not only stop that negate from coming out in and of itself, but it'll also stop the materials they would use from getting to disrupt your, monsters if they're popped by Mix, or spell trap cards if they're being popped by Rekko, so on and so forth. So using Bell against Remix will actually stop multiple layers of disruption from the opponent. I mentioned Vydralis Harmonia earlier as a really good tool that Kewl Tune utilizes, but it's actually a pretty good tool to utilize against Kewl Tune as well, because as mentioned before, even if you're not negating the effects of Kewl Tune monsters, if you remove them from the board, they don't have a way to get another body in play, they're not able to keep making plays, they're not able to keep synchro summoning. They do need at least one Kewl Tune monster in play in order to be able to use the monsters from hand as a material. That's why Ghost Ogre also tends to be really effective in this matchup. Ghost Ogre in particular also is really effective against the field spell JJ Kewl Tune, which now that Kewl Tune has had its limits, a lot of Kewl Tune builds are now on multiple copies. So by chaining the Ogre to Kewl Tune or Kewl Tune's effect, you not only stop the monster from coming out of the deck, but they also had to tribute a tuner just to use the effect, meaning that of course you've also gotten them down one body on board. Again, very important to keep those bodies off the board to stop them from making synchro plays. And as far as DUEL and Lockbird goes, it does tend to be really effective against Kewl Tune. Kewl Tune will typically try to do multiple searches per turn, so throwing out the DUEL against their first search, typically like a normal summon Rekko, or Mix, or if they don't use Kewl Tune Synchro during the draw phase, you could chain DUEL and Lockbird to that as well. DUEL does tend to be pretty effective against this deck. Next up is Branded. So Branded has recently had its combo lines very much simplified and also strengthened with the newest wave of support, particularly White Albaz. However, the simplification of its combo lines also means that the deck becomes pretty easy to hand trap against. Now, in the past, it was pretty common that you would just hold like Ash Blossom, for example, for exactly Branded Fusion, right? However, nowadays, I think the big hand trap target is going to be Fallen of the White Dragon, the new Albaz. This card is very susceptible to a lot of different hand traps. Effect Veiler, Imperm, Ash Blossom, and even Ghost Ogre are all highly effective against the White Albaz. And typically you actually want to hold your hand traps for this card because more Branded combo lines go through this than pretty much any other starter. Now, if their first card they fire off happens to be Branded Fusion, then I would say go for it. You can Ash Blossom there. Ash Blossom, of course, is still a great counter to Branded Fusion, but a lot of the combo lines that utilize White Albaz don't even use Branded Fusion at all. So I would say that most of the time, you should just wait for the White Albaz. As mentioned, Ghost Bell is not only effective against the White Albaz in this deck, but it can actually put in quite a bit of work because the Branded player is going to be moving a lot of cards in and out of their graveyard. I think one of the bigger targets that you could stop is Quem. Quem is often utilized not only as an extender during the Branded turn 1 plays, but also as disruption during the opponent's turn. So either way, Quem makes for an excellent Ghost Spell target. Tri-Brigade Springin's Kit is another pretty good example of a card that is used as an extender that the Ghost Spell could very easily counter. Now, I will say that this is one of those matchups where the DUEL and Lockbird really is not going to be effective whatsoever. I'm honestly really struggling to think of a hand where DUEL and Lockbird would put in really any amount of work. Branded is able to play through it no problem whatsoever. They'll often play their whole turn without searching, or if they do, really only searching exactly one card. So yeah, I would say that the majority of the time, DUEL and Lockbird is going to have no effectiveness against Branded. All right, so Radiant Typhoon, very popular right now and is played a couple of different ways. More often than not right now, you're going to see the Zodiac variant, and if you are finding yourself playing against the Zodiac variant, then you're going to have one very prominent target for negating with Veiler, Imperm, or Ash Blossom, but unlike a lot of these other decks we're covering, it's not going to be the first thing they summon. Against the Zodiac variant in particular, you want to use your Veiler, Imperm, or Ash Blossom negate against MX Saber Invoker. So a lot of the time they'll begin their combo line with Eldom or Swin or Chant for one of them, summon their 2 level 3 bodies, and then go for Invoker. So if you are able to negate the Invoker, you stop them from accessing Zodiac at all, which is going to remove a lot of pieces of disruption from their end board. It removes the Utopia Draco Future Negate, which would prevent some of your other hand traps from working if you have other hand traps. It'll prevent the Trident from hitting the board as well, so you won't have to deal with that pop either. And moreover, if you're going second, it'll also stop them from going like Borbo, Zeus, or something like that. So the Zodiac engine providing a lot of disruption means that it should be one of your priorities to stop. Now, if you are playing against the Pure variant, then I would recommend saving these cards for Crocea. So if you're wondering how to know if you're playing against the Pure or the Zodiac variant, it really just does depend on letting them resolve their Eldom, Swin, Chant earlier, and then if they overlay into Invoker, then they're obviously on Zodiac. But a Pure variant will either special summon by activating a Quick Play spell or tribute summon the Crocea. So at that point, that's when you would want to negate it. There are times where Zodiac variant will go into Crocea after Invoker, and if they have it, they have it. That's fine. I still think stopping the Zodiac portion will make it a lot easier to play through their board than stopping the Radiant Typhoon portion of the deck. Ghost Spell, once again, actually very effective here, particularly once again against Radiant Typhoon Crocea. So here, it's important to note that the Crocea not only adds cards from deck, but also graveyard to hand, meaning, of course, it is susceptible to being hit by Ghost Spell. Ghost Spell can also stop some other effects here, like Radiant Typhoon Ascendance, or it can stop like Varun or Phonix from summoning themselves from the graveyard, but I think that the majority of the time, you really just want to be Ghost Spelling the Crocea. Crocea is their most important search, it's their most important mid-combo extension, and it is very important to stop as a result. And of course, against a deck that is doing so very much searching, the Droll and Lockbird is highly effective here. Very, very good against this deck for sure. Dracotail, which is pretty much always going to be branded Dracotail, definitely another tier 1 deck in the current metagame, and tends to be a little bit trickier to hand trap than some of the other decks on this list, or in this video here rather, which is kind of one of the reasons why it is, I think, so good right now. So here, you won't necessarily be using Ash Veil and Imperm at the same place like a lot of the other decks we've talked about. Here, for Ash Blossom, you really want to be using it against their spell cards, Rahu and Ketu. Now, I tend to just save the Ash Blossom for exclusively Rahu, but if they do begin their turn with by activating Ketu, then I would just go ahead and Ash Blossom it. You could also Ash Blossom Normal Summon Lucius as well, but that doesn't tend to be as common of an opener since the card got limited, or I think it only got semi-limited. Either way, using Ash Blossom against their first search is not a bad idea, but it does kind of hedge on them not having any kind of an extender at all. You could also, again, just wait for the Rahu. I think there's pros and cons to both arguments here, enough so on each side that I don't think there's one clear-cut right answer. But yeah, again, if you think they don't have an extender, you should Ash Blossom early. If you want to play it a little bit safer, just wait for the Rahu. For Veiler and Imperm, you're pretty much always going to want to save these for the Dracotail Arthelion, mostly because that's pretty much going to be your only prominent target. Again, if they begin their turn with Normal Summon Lucius, then yeah, go ahead and negate that, that's totally fine. But when it comes to the Arthelion, that tends to be one of the most important things to negate, as it'll not only represent a threat of bouncing your board if you've made turn 0 plays potentially, or if they're going second, but more importantly on turn 1, that's how they're going to recycle a lot of their stuff back to hand to be able to make more follow-up plays. Now, if they happen to get in a situation where you can Ghost Spell the Arthelion, that's great, but I mean, 95% of Dracotail players have 3 brain cells, which is enough to know that you should put Arthelion as Chainlink 1, and then the other Dracotail effects is Chainlink 2 or 3. That said, Ghost Spell does tend to have some pretty good targets still against this deck, namely the trap cards, because the trap cards all have that effect where you shuffle a Dracotail spell or trap card back from your graveyard into the deck to draw a card. These can also be Ash Blossomed as well, but Ghost Spell is going to have a lot of effectiveness against these trap cards, which means that your ability to break their board will definitely be improved if you have a Ghost Spell in your hand. Now, this is another matchup, much like Branded, where the Droll and Lockbird is actually really not effective at all. The only situation in which Droll is good against Dracotail is if they begin their turn by activating Ketu and then adding Lucius. But most Dracotail players are, able to play well enough to know to not do that. So, Droll and Lockbird, not at all difficult to play around in Dracotail, and as a result tends to not be effective really whatsoever a lot of the time. Alright, next up is Elfnote. Elfnote's another one of those decks when it comes to utilizing a basic negate like Veiler or Ash Blossom or Imperm. The best time to use it is honestly going to be against their first summon or their first play, their starter, right? Which for Elfnote is like Elfnote Lucina, Elfnote Tinia, and Medius the Pure. I think if you have just one of these hand traps in your hand, like again, Ash Blossom, Veiler, or Imperm, then their first play tends to be the best thing to utilize it against. Again, like a lot of their decks, just using it against their first summon and really just kind of hoping they don't have an extender. If you've only got that one hand trap, is often going to be your best bet. Ghost Spell has some decent application here, namely against the trap card Rhapsidia, as well as the Seraphim Strelitzia, the level 7 Synchro monsters. So it's not really one where it's necessarily going to have, you know, the ability to stop their starter, but it can still stop them mid-combo, leaving them in like a bit of an awkward situation of, you know, like a half board state or something. Ghost Ogre is also a pretty effective card here because it can not only be utilized against the continuous spell and trap cards like Welcome Home and Rhapsidia, which need to be on the field like any other continuous spell or trap card, need to remain on the field through the resolution of their effect for that effect to actually resolve, but it actually has some opportunities to be used against the Elfnote Power Patron as well. They'll often begin their plays by, you know, trying to use the Elfnote Power Patron to buff up one of the level 6s to 9, and then make the Baron de Fleur. After making Baron de Fleur, they can then search off the Elfnote Power Patron. But if you were to pop the Power Patron, they'd be left with a level 9 monster and nothing else on board, making it very awkward for them to be able to actually continue their plays, let alone, you know, search and then make the Baron negate. In terms of just sheer impact, it's a little situational, but Ghost Ogre in that situation is probably one of the most high impact hand traps you could use against Elfnote. And when it comes to Droll and Lockbird, Elfnote is... it's kind of situational a little bit. Like if they begin with Lucina, you know, for example, then it tends to be really, really good. But Elfnote does have some turns where they can play pretty effectively around the Droll. It's kind of hand dependent though, so all in all, I'd say Droll and Lockbird is pretty solid against Elfnote. Alright, Sky Striker is probably one of the most prominent anti-meta decks right now because it has such a good matchup against so many decks in the current metagame, while also still being very, very strong in its own right. So here, I think that Ash, Veiler, and Imperm tend to have a really good common target yet again, this time being the Sky Striker Ace 0. Hand trapping against Sky Striker is a lot more situationally dependent on what they begin their plays with, but a lot of the time they'll begin by using either the Hornet Drones plus Ray, or just Ray, or the Radiant Typhoon bodies to eventually go into the Ace 0. And when it comes to Veiler and Imperm especially, that is definitely going to be one of your better targets, no matter which of the effects it's using. On turn 1, it's probably just going to end up searching a card, but overall tends to be very, very good. It might be tempting sometimes to hold Ash Blossom for exactly Engage, right? But the problem there, I mean, that is a really good target, don't get me wrong. Especially if they begin with like Engage, then you should definitely be Ash Blossoming it for sure. I wouldn't necessarily wait for exactly Engage if you have Ash Blossom in certain situations though, because they could still just use Kagari later to add the Engage back to hand in order to then be able to use it again, right? So I think that if they are beginning their plays by setting up into an Ace 0 and then summoning it, Ash Blossom against Ace 0 to stop them from searching the Engage at all tends to be pretty effective, again, so that way they can't just wheel the Engage back into hand with Kagari. Speaking of Kagari, the Ghost Bell is pretty good against it here, and the Ghost Bell is also actually really good against the Ace 0 because Ace 0 interacts with the graveyard off of both of its effects. Not only can it add a Sky Striker spell from deck or graveyard to hand, but it can also summon the Ray and Rose from either the deck or the graveyard. So Ghost Bell has a lot of utilization again against the Ace 0, which I think when it comes to the majority of your hand traps is going to be your best bet as far as like one card that you would want to counter. And I don't think I need to tell you just how good Droll and Lockbird is here. Sky Striker does so many draws, so many searches during their turn, that Droll will definitely hugely limit the scope of what they're able to do on their turn. Now, when it comes to what hand traps you should be using in the current metagame, we've gone over a lot of the more common ones here, right? Like Veiler, Imperm, Ash Blossom, all that kind of fun stuff. I didn't really bother going too much into stuff like Maxi and Fuelos because not only is it kind of a given that you're going to be playing those at any given time anyway, it's also kind of a given of when you use them, right? You could either fire them off at the beginning of the turn, or you could wait for your opponent's first attempt at special summoning. There's pros and cons to both, but I think either way, these are pretty obviously good, and it's pretty obvious of when to use them as well, right? So as far as like Effect Veiler and Imperm, I actually am not playing these quite as much as I have in past metas, especially Imperm. Effect Veiler is honestly going to be one of those cards that you really only utilize in certain decks. Typically decks that care about it being a level 1 tuner, right? Kewl Tune is definitely one of the first ones that come to mind. Blue Eyes White Dragon is another. Elfnote is another good example of a deck that really likes having access to a level 1 tuner that can just normal summon, right? But I wouldn't necessarily play Veiler in like just any old deck. Imperm I think is a lot more flexible because it's not just good on the opponent's turn. You can set it on yours. It's got the column negate as well if you set it, making it more impactful in a lot more situations. But even Imperm, I'm not finding myself playing quite as much as certain other hand traps in this meta. One of those hand traps being one I've mentioned quite a bit is Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. This is not a hand trap that you would necessarily think of as being like a staple, right? And at least not on the same level of like Ash Blossom, Imperm, Maxi, Fua. But I think in this current metagame, Ghost Bell should definitely be really high up on your consideration of what hand traps you're playing. And if you need evidence of why, just go back and rewatch the video up to this point, right? Because we've mentioned Ghost Bell having good usage against all of the top meta decks that we've covered in this video. Ghost Bell is a highly impactful hand trap right now, and I think will continue to be in the future. You obviously get one off the bundle, but I think it's absolutely worth crafting at least one more copy, if not having a full playset of 3, because that is definitely one of the hand traps that I'm prioritizing across all my decks in the current metagame. Now, when it comes to hand traps that are a little bit more iffy, I'm actually really iffy on Joel and Lockbird right now for the first time in quite a while. Joel and Lockbird in the past was kind of situational as far as like whether or not it would actually fully shut down a deck, and we've had a pretty good streak lately, well, good depending on your review of the card, of Joel and Lockbird being really effective against pretty much all the top meta decks. But I think Branded has actually really come along and shaken things up quite a bit here, because Joel and Lockbird has really no effectiveness against it at all. And not only is Branded itself a very prominent force in this metagame as a deck, but also White Albaz as an engine is showing up in so many different decks, right? And the Joel and Lockbird, again, really does not tend to be very effective against it. There are other engines too that are really common that Joel and Lockbird isn't really that good against, like Fiendsmith. But I think it really is Branded and its engine of White Albaz that is really causing Joel to not be quite as effective in the current metagame. So in recent months, I'd kind of consider 2 Joel and Lockbird to be a staple in most decks, like to the level of Maxi and Ash Blossom. But in this month in particular, I'm actually kind of starting to question that and have ended up dropping Joel and Lockbird from some of my decks recently. I still think it is really good, and as we saw in this video, there's still a lot of meta decks where it is really effective. But I do think that it's not quite as much of a staple hand trap as you might necessarily think, or as it has been in more recent months. And if you really want to talk about hand traps that have sort of taken a fall from grace, we have to, of course, mention Nibiru, the Primal Being. This card has been seeing a steady decline of play for quite a while now, and, at least as far as, like, my personal opinion goes, right now is kind of an all-time low for Nibiru and its usage in the metagame, and I think that's more a result of power creep than anything else, right? Because just so many different decks nowadays have that Nibiru contingency plan, whether it's putting up a negate within your 5 summons or just having an extender that makes it so the Nibiru doesn't really have a lot of impact anyway. It really just makes the card a lot more difficult to play right now. I don't think Nibiru is a terrible card by any means. Don't get me wrong, it is still pretty good. But again, just so many decks have so many different ways to kind of account for it. Again, whether it's stopping it or just playing right through it anyway, that I don't really think Nibiru is worth playing in the vast majority of decks right now. I used to consider Nibiru a kind of staple hand trap, right? But it's been many months for me since that's been the case. So for me right now, I really can't recommend Nibiru in a lot of decks. All right, that is gonna do it. That pretty much covers everything I wanted to for this video. Like I said up top, I would like to be doing this more frequently, ideally maybe even once a month. So if this style of video is something you want to see more of in the future, definitely let me know in the comment section below, and I will be happy to oblige. I know some people out there are probably going to be saying like, oh, but what about board breakers? What about Droplet and Super Poly and Fallen and Virtuous? Don't worry, I actually do plan on covering board breakers in a separate video. Hopefully even this week that video should be going out. So we will get to those as well, don't worry. But for here, I wanted to mainly focus on hand traps and when to use them on your opponent's turn one. So hopefully at least some of you found the information here helpful. Either way, I really just want to give you a huge thanks for watching, especially all the way to the very end of the video like this. Just a fantastic way to support not just me, but any smaller YouTube channel. And speaking of support, we gotta thank those YouTube members and Patreon subscribers as mentioned up top. So we're gonna move now to the end credits so we can do so. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early, as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.